Hello everyone and welcome to Campus Debates Season 2. My name is Masi Vugutsa, your usual host, and as always, we are ready to host you for this amazing episode of Campus Debates Season 2. What has happened so far, you might wonder? We've been having the first half of the preliminary rounds where schools came together, debated against each other, and we had 2 schools knocked out from the first preliminary rounds. On to the second round, we have teams debating against each other, 1 round each. If you win, you get 3 points. If you lose, you get 0 points. I don't think this time we're generous enough to give you 1 point, but that's fine. Now, if it is your first time joining us for Campus Debates, it is a show where young people come together to engage on different topics that affect me, you, and the society at large. Could be the finance bill, could be taxation, could be economic structures, or anything you might want to wonder. Now, I know you're tired of listening to me talking about what the show is about. You want to know why exactly it's interesting. The most interesting part of it is that it's from the perspective of young people. Most of you wonder whether Gen Z can actually understand the issues that exist within society. This show is here to prove to you that Gen Z understands, they are in touch, and they have accurate information and possible solutions to what is happening to me, to you, and everyone associated with you. You've heard about what this round looks like, what Campus Debate Season looks like, and at the long run, you've heard about what schools actually exist within the show. With that, I would love to welcome the speakers for tonight. We have speakers from St. Paul's University as proposition and speakers from Kenyatta University as opposition. What is lovely about the speakers that are before us this evening is that they are actually ready to debate and to engage with you on what taxation ideally looks like, what it should look like, and what it is you want it to look like from everyone's perspective. I will give them a minute each to introduce themselves and let you know something interesting that they would love to share with you. Side proposition, you have the floor.
So hi everyone, my name is Sandra Njoki, representing St. Paul's University. Something interesting about myself. Not interesting, I like reading. So yeah.
It is interesting, she loves reading.
Hello everyone, I'm Gloria Bond from St. Paul's University, and I love reading just as my partner, and I love playing tennis.
Tennis and reading. I think that's a partnership duo that is ready to beat side opposition. But before I shoot my foot, I'd love to welcome opposition to introduce themselves as well.
Hello guys, my name is John Mwendwa from Kenyatta University. Something interesting about me is I love appearing on TV.
Don't we all?
Hello guys, my name is Chester Vidonyi, representing Kenyatta University. Something interesting about me, I'm a budding actuary.
We have amazing speakers before us, and something interesting about opposition, they don't mind the attention that comes from being on TV. Now, it's a girls versus guys debate without actually intending for it to be, and I know they're up to the task to engage with you from this particular evening and this show. Without further ado, the motion for this round reads, this House believes that the government of Kenya should cut its spending as opposed to increasing taxes. This House believes that the government of Kenya should cut its spending as opposed to increasing taxes. I know you have an opinion. I know you have a view. Engage with us on X at KTN Home or message us on WhatsApp with the number 0759434389. You've understood who the speakers are and the schools that are represented. With that, I know you're curious to wonder who actually is going to judge them from this particular motion. I will allow the judges 1 minute each to introduce themselves and tell us something interesting about them.
Hello everyone, my name is Eva Wanjiru. I'm one of the judges. Something interesting about me is I love binge watching. Yeah, and to our debaters, I'd like to, it might sound cliche, but put your best foot forward. Thank you.
All right, my name is Brian Mwindi. I'll be the chair for these rounds once again. Today, as a career judge, but I opt to be an average intelligent Kenyan. So you guys educate me on the motion. Let me be within touch of what exactly are we talking about taxes, and may the best team win.
My name is Perez Ngono, a retired debater, so currently judging, and I require all teams to put their best foot forward. Thank you.
The speakers are interesting and the judges are ready to engage with every single argument that comes. We have a binge watcher, we have a career judge, and a retired speaker. I think they're adequate enough to tell us which team has won and which team has lost. With that, we welcome first speaker side proposition. Here, here.
My speech starts in 3, 2, 1. This House believes that the government of Kenya should cut its spending as opposed to increasing taxes. Ladies and gentlemen, let's understand that this motion is about participation, representation, and how the government should reduce the amount of money it allocates and uses for various purposes, including public services, infrastructure, salaries, and other expenditures such as jet setting around the globe and using high-end private jet, as opposed to raising the rates at which individuals and businesses are taxed by the government. Taxes, if you may not have understood the term, are compulsory financial charges or levies imposed by the government to fund its activities. By compulsory, there's no way out. You as a working individual, your salary is being taxed. Whether you're working or not, the goods and services that you purchase are being taxed. And it's problematic to increase the taxes because of the economic state of our country. And the key actors that we have in this debate today, one, are the people of the state of Kenya, and number two, the state in and of itself, because of the trickle-down effects that the motion has. In our side of the world, we believe that by reducing the bureaucratic overhead, streaming government programs, cutting non-essential services, or reducing public sector salaries and benefits, this could lead to a more efficient government by eliminating waste and reducing the national debt. It can also prevent inflation and reduce the burden on taxpayers, fostering a more favorable environment for economic growth and investment. So panel, before they come and tell you that cutting spending could harm vital services such as infrastructure, such as education and healthcare, here's why they are wrong. Using a study of the previous two governments that has been existing in Kenya, one of them, His Excellency the late Honorable Mwai Kibaki, introduced free primary and secondary education, which is now fading away. And in his regime, there was Great Thika Superhighway, which was built, and in the immediate former government, SGR was established, and the healthcare service of Linda Mama was established as well to alleviate the financial burden on pregnant women. All this took place when the common mwananchi were not being overtaxed, as now that we have the current discussion of increased tax paying and the financial bill that is under discussion. So increasing taxes can reduce disposable income and consumer spending, potentially slowing down the economic growth of our nation, Kenya. And another reason as to why they are wrong, higher taxes might discourage investment and entrepreneurship, which are crucial for economic dynamism and job creation. Back to reality, Kenya is a financially struggling country and therefore needs both local and international markets for the economic growth of its state. So, but if the international investors are discouraged by imposing of higher taxes, where does it stand in the grand scheme of economic growth scale? As said, in the international scale, by the former Senator Vinnick of the US, that pardoning us our debts as poor African countries does not help our economic growth, but cutting taxes will enable us to pay our debt and achieve economic growth. Having high tax rates make it impossible to build capital in these countries. We have some of the lowest wage workers in the world, yet companies such as Nike can't have their factories in one of these countries because of the oppressive tax rates. And these tax rates have killed our every and any possibility of economic development. And with that, we have no hope of helping ourselves and at the mercy of charities and loans. I hope you, our able listeners, is able to trace down the cycle as it continues. So we're being promised that when they get more tax, when they get more loans, when they increase taxes, that we are able to build our economic growth from one level to another. But in reality, it actually does more worse than good, and we are not able to pay our debts. We are not able to cater for these services that we think that is actually helping. We are not able to establish our infrastructure. We're not able to pay for children to go to school. We're not able to have all these benefits that we are being lied to, that it's what is being brought to the table. So panel, in their world, they as representatives, they as the lawmaker in the land, injustice can be invested on them. They regard public participation and views as futile. And while the same public are the people that they are representing. Also in their world, they increase taxation and make up holidays for their citizens. They increase taxes and increase the days that the citizens are supposed to pay these taxes. But there's no assuming a financial correlation where when the income level of these citizens are actually constant or they are reduced, where do they accept these citizens to go get the money to pay extra taxes when their salary is at minimal? And when they are told that citizens are actually struggling and can't afford the new prices of bread, they say that let them eat cake. Oh, well, in this case, it's kangumu. And in the building capacity, economic stability can be achieved in our side of the world where we cut and stabilize expenditure and not have a false perception of our net worth. While in their world, they have this false sense of government wealth through heavy taxation and debt, when in reality, they do not have this money that they say to have. And with that being said, I stand of the opinion of cutting spending, and strongly oppose increasing of taxes. Thank you.
Proposition has made their argument and opposition was listening to them. With that, we welcome first speaker opposition to start their case. Here.
We've gotten a very fine speech from the proposition here, defining exactly what taxes are and what they're meant for. But one key thing that they have not showcased here in this particular motion is what these taxes target and why it is justified for them to be increased. And also, they have not really shown us how really reducing our spending as a government will help us better or how it will actually help us solve the problem of the national debt fully in comparison. They've said that taxes are compulsory fees that are accrued to citizens so that the government can do its role to its people. And that is something that they need to acknowledge here, that the state has an obligation to the people. The state has an obligation to the people in terms of development. The state has an obligation to the people in terms of recurrent expenditure. Currently, in our economy, around 70% of the revenue gained by the government is going towards the national debt. And they believe that just cutting our spending will be enough for us to solve this particular problem. We think not. We believe that 30% of that revenue that remains is not enough for the government to accrue all its recurrent expenditure and also help the nation go towards development. We also believe that there is the current backload of loans that using taxes only for that benefit, using expenditure only for that benefit will not accrue that particular debt. There is an inherent need for us to reduce our borrowing in that we need to increase our self-sustenance for the same. And that is why we believe that there is a higher need for us to increase our taxes so that we can increase self-sustenance. We're not saying that we will get full self-sustenance. There is no country that has such a metric or such a method available. We just need to increase it to an extent that we do not over-rely on foreign aid from other countries, and that is why there is a need for us to increase our taxes. They'll be asking a question whereby, why not reduce our spending? And I'll get to that later. I'll tell you why there is a need for us to reduce borrowing first. It is important because, one, we need to note that loans gain interest. And so, the more time we take to repay these loans, the more burdensome they are to and to the younger generations that are coming forward. And also, we need to note that all these loans that we are getting, at the end of the day, they come with conditionalities. They come with conditions, whereby we have the loaning countries or the lending countries bring out conditions that dictate policies on our people, policies that affect our nation, so that they are for their benefit. And that is something that we're trying to get rid of in essence. The nature of Kenya currently is that there is an increasing population through and through. People are increasing every day, the demography is increasing every day, and the government needs to spend more and more every day. Not only in terms of salaries and all that, I'll get to why we won't reduce salaries, but also there's also public amenities and all that that need to be provided for by the government. And I'll tell you why we will not reduce our spending. Because we believe that reducing our expenditure or the government reducing its spending spells in the name that there is less money being rolled out for development by the government. This means that there's less spending by the government on public amenities. What they're basically trying to advocate for is that this money that will have been rolled out there to be rolled out to the national debt. And we also believe that this money isn't even enough for us to solve this particular problem of national debt. We'll still go back to the cycle that brought us to this problem, that we'll be borrowing loans because we do not have enough money for the same. We believe that we will have the government investing less in our local economy by having them spending less, because expenditure generally for the government means any money that they roll out for any purpose whatsoever, the revenue is what they get in, expenditure is what they give out. So we will have less money invested into the economy, we'll have less money invested in public amenities and all that. This means that our sewer systems will have hospitals with very poor facilities and very poor equipment. We'll have road redevelopment projects that are stalled in the name of we're trying to solve a debt. Why is this bad? When we have less development in a country, we cannot be able to even compete with our neighboring nations, East Africa in general. We won't be able to compete with the likes of Tanzania and the rest. We'll have less developed areas, either getting really slow development in essence, or no development at all, because there is no money for the same. And that is why we need to increase taxes. There is also the need for us to maintain the standard that we have brought ourselves to. There is no doubt that Kenya is a developing nation, but among other developing nations, it is one of the forefront runners in development. We believe that we need to maintain the state that Kenya is in currently so that we can continue reaping the benefits that we've gotten as a country as a benefit of the same. Thank you. I rest my case.
Taxes, budgets, loans, these are all we seem to talk about, and I think they are the pain points that citizens can never heal from. But all in all, I think money is always a sore subject, but ideally that's why we are here, to talk about whether our state needs to reduce its spending or whether we need to increase taxation to actually support the state's activities. You have heard from side proposition and opposition, very valid arguments from both teams to defend and reject the whole idea of taxation from citizens. With that, we'll be going on a short commercial break. It's time for you to visit that washroom, take that food that you need to continue with the following seasons and episodes that exist for Campus Debate. From the short break, as the first half, we had a debate from side KU and St. Paul's University. The argument is, should the government cut its spending or increase taxation for the citizens? Side proposition argued that it's more beneficial to actually cut spending than increasing taxation because you want the money to be on the consumers rather than the government as a whole. Side opposition rejects this notion, and their argument is that more money means less loans, and less loans means more capacity for states to actually grow and progress. I don't know which argument swayed you or not, and if this is your first time joining us on the second half of the debate, that is exactly what went on. Without further ado, I welcome side proposition to continue their argument. Here.
Okay, so my time begins in 3, 2, 1. So I'm going to start with a bit of context, then I'm going to get to rebuttals, then I'm going to get to pragmatic benefits to essentially show you how it is beneficial and why it is beneficial to actually cut on spending rather than increasing taxes to our actors who are the people of the country and the country in and of itself, right? So a bit of context. We live in a third world country. What this looks like is we have low all-rounded revenue, right? Struggle of growth. That means in terms of like circulation of the currency in the economy, there's not enough of that, and the revenue essentially remains the same, right? So at a point where they're able to prove that, when they increase taxes, essentially they will be able to even increase this revenue of the people, which we believe is not in the capacity of the country at the moment, then they essentially win this debate. At the point where they're not able to prove that, then it becomes problematic for them, right? A bit of rebuttals essentially to what they had talked about, right? So they talked about the whole idea of the target of the taxes, right? Which they did not essentially prove what the target is, right? So a response to this is we need to understand that there's corruption on both sides of the world. That is something we're willing to concede, right? But on their side of the world, it is kind of worse because there's a false sense of stability created with like increased taxes, because if you increase taxes of the people, you take their money, you keep it in your banks and in your budgets and all of that. You create a false sense of having money. Therefore, corruption increases, and even the false sense of like stability is essentially problematic, because at a point where it gets to like the government cannot essentially take more taxes to from these people, rather, the people of the state, it essentially becomes problematic for them and for the state, right? They talked about the whole idea of reducing borrowing to increase self-sustenance, something that they were not essentially able to prove, right? So part of the reason why we have the problem of like increased borrowing and lack of self-sustenance is because the government is not essentially able to live within its means, right? This is solved by cutting of spending, in that it creates like a sense of discipline whereby the government is able to essentially create a world in which it kind of lives within its means, right? Within its means, sorry. So essentially cutting on spending reduces this problem of like increased borrowing and increased taxes and all of that, yeah? They talked about the whole idea of or rather he tried to paint a picture of the fact that he won't reduce salaries to be able to take these taxes. It's like he doesn't essentially understand how taxes work. Taxes work in that they reduce like the income of the person or the citizen in the country in the first place, right? So at a point where you're saying that you're not reducing revenue, then you essentially don't understand how taxes work. You're taking this money from the people's pockets, right? Now, on to pragmatic benefits and to show you why we win on our sides of the world, right? On our side of the world. Talk about economic growth, right? This is stimulation of the private sector, right? At a point where the government reduces spending means that it kind of reduces capacity of the public, the monopolization, let me say that, of the public sector, in that it creates an avenue whereby the private sector is able to thrive and take up these opportunities that were essentially taken up by the public sector. What this looks like, or rather the impacts of this, is increased revenue to the government in terms of taxes, and increased revenue to even the private sector, and increased circulation as a whole. So therefore, if you cut spending in the public sector, it allows the private sector to kind of rise above. It increases revenue for the country. Everyone is happy, right? Another thing that it does, which is another pragmatic benefit, is discipline of spending, right? I talked about creating a false sense of stability, right? If the government learns to live within its means, meaning that it creates a sense of discipline whereby if it does not essentially chase or pursue extravagant pursuits, these extravagant trips and all of that, it essentially creates a world whereby, I'll take it in the kind of last minute, it creates a world whereby this, the country essentially benefits in all of this level, right? In the sense that if it lives within its means, it won't like need to borrow a lot of money from like the external sources, reducing the amount of debts. Therefore, it won't essentially need to like live for a long time paying these debts. So essentially, it solves this problem of like debts and all of that. Another thing that it helps with, which is another benefit, is inflation control, right? Another thing that taxes cause, which is present on their side of the world, is the fact that at a point where you're taxing each and every single thing, which is fuel, bread, car insurance, right, it increases the prices of these things because these people also need to cover costs, right? So it increases the prices of these things, which creates a sense of inflation in the country, which is essentially problematic in that the country lacks self-sustenance that they're trying to prove in the first place. Another thing, which is the final thing, is the obligation of the government to its people. The government has an obligation, which he also talked about, to protect its people. So at a point where you're constantly taking money from these people's pockets and you're not essentially increasing their income or anything, then you're hurting these people. So essentially it is detrimental to the people in and of itself. So it fails to provide, or it fails to fulfill this obligation to its people. The people become chaotic. It creates a sense of anarchy in and of itself, right? So it is essentially problematic to increase taxes in a certain country rather than cutting costs and creating a sense of discipline and stability in and of itself, which is like created on our side of the world. So they need to prove how these taxes will be able to increase this capacity of the country rather than hurting the people and the state by extension. I rest my case.
Side proposition has made their argument. The argument is that they think taxation is a better way to actually deal with the economic structures of these particular governments. With that, we welcome opposition to respond and finalize their arguments from their second speaker. Hear, hear.
Before I begin the speech, I know this is something that is very dear to Kenyans. So if I say something you don't like and you meet on the street, please don't punch me. Yeah. That being said, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. We think a lot of these taxes are justified. For one, things such as targeting digital creatives. We think that in any state, a democratic state, where people earn money economically, you're always taxed by the state. Doctors are taxed, teachers, the people work in this media company are taxed. Like, I go on TikTok and these creators join in 2 months and they are going to trips in Dubai. I think like we should like target them. Sure, you say they are the youth and so forth, but this is a means they are using to make like money within the country. Everybody else is taxed. I don't see why they are special than anyone else. 2 is that taxes like targeting people from outside countries who don't stay in Kenya, but they sell online goods to Kenya. Like they sell goods to Kenya through the online business, and they benefit from this. They are probably buying Ferraris and Bugattis in America, and because they are selling it to Kenyans, we don't see why you shouldn't target these people. 3 is things such as the eco levy. We are talking about targeting companies because they are polluting the environment. They pollute the environment, they cause global change. That is why Kenya was flooding the other day. Kenya floods, you destroy bridges, you destroy roads. You want the government to mend these roads and bridges. We have to tax these companies. They are directly responsible for it. When your bridge collapses, you will tell your governor to repair the road. But you don't want your governor to tax the company that is causing your bridge to collapse. We think they are justified in targeting some of these people. But beyond that, we say, there is this idea coming from proposition of living within your means. Let's be realistic. The president cutting his traveling will not like be significant enough to raise the amount of revenue equivalent to what the tax bill will raise. That means you probably have to do a lot of things which are more like radical. You have to reduce the money you use on development. That means the guy in Mandera that wants a new hospital and to stop using medicinal drugs that are killing him will probably never get a hospital. This means government has to do things such as fire employees to reduce the amount of money of recurrent expenditure, which means a lot of your fathers and mothers will be jobless and won't be able to come to KTN anymore. 3, it probably means industries that are reliant on government contracts can't get these contracts anymore. So probably means those companies will have to shut down, again bad for the economy. But beyond that, it means things such as drainage and sewage in cities such as Nairobi can no longer be maintained, which means your capital city, which you like to flaunt against Tanzania and Uganda, telling them how you are more developed than them, can no longer maintain those those standards. This is bad because like you can no longer then live in these cities. We think like we are in a situation where the country is using 70% of its income to repay debts. We need to recognize this and we need to deal with this. 30% that is remaining is just not enough. We need to raise revenue because otherwise what happens is, like my partner tells you, you can't do things such as develop your country. And this idea that comes from them that, oh, if government stops investing in the economy, what that means is you encourage private investors. That cannot happen because this is the idea. Government investment accounts for around 40% of all total investment in the country, even for more developed nations, which probably means private investors cannot be able to account for this on their own. They need the government to do this. But beyond that, you are hurting people more on your side because in our world, let's run a comparative. What happens is bread becomes more expensive, which probably means you won't buy bread every day. So probably Monday, skip Tuesday, buy Wednesday. I know it sounds bad. Probably means you won't eat chapati daily. You'll have to eat ugali a lot of the time. But in their world, you can live with this. You won't die. Sure, life becomes more expensive. You won't live like you see with the Kardashians, but at least you'll survive. Their world means you have poor hospitals, which probably means you can't get the medicine you want in these hospitals. Probably means the guys in Mandera cannot get new hospitals. Probably means your cities have very bad drainage system and sewer systems that are polluting the space and like are probably making you guys sick. Probably means government is firing a lot of people and causing a lot of industries to collapse. And the idea of repaying taxes, realize in their world where they don't get development, citizens will not take this. What probably means they will go the vicious circle of going to borrow again. The reason we're in this problem is because of borrowing. We can't go back to that cycle because of all the reason my partner tells you, proud to oppose.
The debaters have stated their case. Side proposition argues and tells you that taxation is the only way to raise enough money to actually fund this particular government, and the only way to do this is to cut government spending. Side opposition argues that taxation is the only way that you can actually elevate the whole idea for what states looks like and even how much money they can raise for themselves. I don't know which argument swayed you. Feel free to engage with us on X at KTN Home with the hashtag Campus Debates, or message us on WhatsApp with the number 0759434389. With that, we allow you to sit with a few of the arguments you've gotten from side proposition and opposition. We'll be going on a short break, and when we are back, we'll get to hear from the judges, whether they were swayed or not. For staying put after the short break that we are from. What happened in the first and the second half of the debates? From side proposition, they argued that they want government to actually cut its spending, and that should be sufficient to sustain a state. From side opposition, they argue taxation is the only way to sustain a state, and if you choose to actually cut government spending, it will not be enough to actually guarantee progression and development within state structures. The problem is that neither of the teams have been able to sway the judges. With this, the judges have decided to ask a question each to both teams for them to actually find out which team has actually made more sense and which team do you think can sway you. As an audience, we're willing to hear from you whether side proposition or side opposition swayed you. But before you let us know, we will welcome the judges to ask a question to both teams. Judges.
Okay, my question goes to side proposition, and the question is, how do you weigh between sustenance of the people vis-a-vis the standard of the country? And in layman's language, do you prefer the country having better hospitals rather than the citizens eating bread which is affordable to them?
Question to opposition. Employed Kenyans file their nil returns. They need quality services or social services. At a point in time that these increased taxes are not directly proportional to the development they require, what mitigations are governments putting in place to mitigate this?
The questions are very intellectual and very engaging. I know as an audience, you equally have a response to the questions that the judges have asked. But with that, We will allow the speakers 1 minute each to respond to the questions that the judges have asked. Proposition, you have the floor. Here.
Okay. So your question was, do we prefer better hospitals or rather better infrastructure or better like prices of goods, right? So we need to understand that on our side of the world, we're not eradicating taxes completely, right? We're just having taxes at a reasonable amount, not overtaxing citizens at a point where they feel overstimulated, their incomes are overstretched. We're just taxing them enough to be able to sustain our country. What we're doing with these taxes is adequately utilizing them. Instead of having preposterous expenditures and all of that, we're using the money for things we actually need. We're using them to fix our infrastructure. We're using them to like build our hospitals, as you talked about. We are taxing them, yes, because even in the previous status quos, we had taxes taking place, only that even as my partner talked about, Kibaki's time, we had taxation happening, only that this money was being put into good use, and that is why we had the economy growing, right? So we are taxing these people, just not overtaxing them. We are growing our economy, we are focusing on ourselves, and we are keeping our people happy, whereby people will be able to afford these things, meaning they'll be able to buy them in plenty, meaning we'll accrue more revenue, right? He talked about people not buying bread, right? It's not just bread. I can afford, or rather I can, yes, you talk about like health issues, but at a point where I can completely not afford these things, then it becomes problematic. At a point where I cannot afford bread every single day, then it becomes problematic. So essentially have the people affording these things, don't overtax them.
So the question from Perez was the idea of how do you ensure that when you give taxes, there will be development? I think something of the sort. I think democracy ensures that. Democracy ensures you'll get development. Like you elect leaders who, like, you know, they make the promises of they will bring development. If they don't deliver, you elect new ones. While they're in parliament, you can protest, demonstrate, and do such kind of things. You can always reach out to your leaders through social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Like, I think recently during this budget thing, people were able to access the mobile numbers of the MPs. So because it's a democracy, you can do such things and message them directly. So democracy ensures that development will happen. And just to finish off, I think the comparative is clear. It's either taxes or you reduce government expenditure. So I don't think Prop can say we'll tax people but not too much. That is like coming to our side. What do you mean by that? You have to, you know, defend your comparative. And you know, the tax bill that has been introduced is to increase, has not yet been implemented, but is to increase taxes from the current rates. So you can't say we'll tax them not too much. That is, you are doing the finance bill. You know, it's...
You have heard from Wendwa. The comparative is very simple. Is it you actually opting for taxation, or you opting for decreasing government spending as a whole? I don't know which argument sways you. I don't know whether side opposition needs to argue that you need taxation as a whole and you eradicate reduction of government spending. I don't know whether proposition needs to argue that you need to eradicate taxation as a whole and actually push for the idea of government spending. With that, we welcome our judges to let us know which argument swayed them, whether proposition or opposition is getting 3 points and which team is getting 0.
Actually, I have to admit that this is a very close call, as both cases in this debate were equally heavy. As an average voter on this bench as well, we had a very hard time in determining which one outweighs what. But on that marginal win, we give it to Kenyatta University for 3 wins, and St. Paul's. And luckily, even if for a very good fight, you are brilliant, but then it was not able to match up what KU was bringing to the debate. So this is exactly the justifications as to why we give it to KU. Kenyatta University does point out a very truth value case whereby we're living in a country where these taxes are very much justified. You cannot attack one group of people and leave the others. You cannot tax companies and leave those people who are doing digital monetization in TikTok and stuff. No one is special. So going into the comparative that you are bringing to the debate, where we're living in a country where we are heavily dependent on debt, at this particular structure, they put it in numbers whereby the country in itself, 70% of its revenue is going back to repay the same debt. So they need to have enough money to repay that debt, as well as cater for the people who are like living in Kenya. So those increased taxes, those increased money that the government is collecting, it's justified for them so that they can be able to put the country afloat. And they give you all justifications on harms that you think that are going to harm the country, in terms of, these investors are going to run away because, these high taxes are going to be present in Kenya. But with them, they respond by, Kenya is democratic. We have these allies that we are friends with, the US, the Britons, and etc. So they're not going anywhere. They're here with us to stay, regardless of the measures the country is putting. So with that, I think they are very much relevant in the debate as compared to what you're bringing into the house. So for you, you're here to defend the mwananchi. The mwananchi cannot afford this kind of a lifestyle because, the taxes are too much high. But what's the comparative? Are you going to eat bread that is very much affordable, but once you get sick, you're going to a crowded hospital because there's no money for development? So you see the weight of comparative on the intensity of harm is much more higher on your side in terms of harming the same citizen as compared to them, where they're going to increase taxes and everyone is going to be happy in the long run, instead of you having a cheaper option of life, but again, at the expense of no development, crowded hospitals and poor roads. And with that, I think that's the call. KU, congratulations for the job well done.
Our intelligent panel of judges have decided that your government needs to tax you more than to reduce its spending. I don't know whether you agree with this call that the judges have made, or if you have further arguments that you can actually contribute to the whole idea of why you think your government should cut its spending. Do you think your president needs to travel less, or do you think your MPs need to be more accessible to you by reducing their spending? Or you need to be taxed more for you to have better services, better development in your county or in your area. With that, the win goes to Kenyatta University. They've been able to garner for themselves 3 points, and because they won their previous preliminary rounds, Kenyatta University now stands at 9 points in total, and that is a massive win for them as Kenyatta University. For St. Paul's University, however, they were able to get 0 points from this round, and in total now, they have a total of 4 points from the first 3 rounds that they've been able to do. Hopefully, we get to see them again in the rounds that are to follow, but with that, we have come to the end of this episode of Campus Debates. It's been lovely, it's been fun, we've had massive arguments from this beautiful team of speakers. They've argued whether your government needs to spend more or needs to tax you more. With that, engage with us on X at KTN Home with the hashtag Campus Debates, or message us on WhatsApp through the number 0759434389. I don't know if this show interested you, but I hope to